So, Benjamin, thank you so much for taking the time to be in this interview. Uh, we're going to do this research interview in order to know how the IronHack, as a virtual hacking competition process, facilitates the hacker's development process. So, this is the main goal of this interview. So, let's start by introducing yourself.
I'm Ben Eichhorn. I'm a senior in computer information technology. Um, one more semester left. I kind of am interested in web development in general. I work for Purdue CCO here on campus, so I've had experience with them and everything. Yeah.
Great. If you look back 3 weeks to the first info session on the IronHack, what made you want to participate?
So I think it's the ability to kind of, since it was kind of a part of my class as well, the ability to kind of have the opportunity to learn something completely new, but also apply skills that I currently have was pretty neat. I'd never really worked with open data, so it was really cool to have the ability to, have that freedom to choose, um, what data sets I wanted, as well as, kind of explore how I can solve the problem that was given.
All right. Describe the process, how you worked on the first app before the first submission deadline.
Yeah, so what I kind of did was I had a general idea in mind on what I was going to kind of formulate, and I kind of had to figure out, okay, can I find data sets that are applicable for what I want to do? And so it was mostly just kind of researching, okay, does this exist? Does this exist? And kind of seeing how, kind of laying out, okay, if I have this, I can then implement this part into the application. And so it was mostly planning for me on, okay, do I have this available? And if I do, okay, I can add this feature, etc.
There was any kind of, problem that you faced at that early beginning?
Yeah, I'd say finding the data sets, and finding one that would be applicable and how, it would actually, since I had my idea in my head, trying to find a data set so I didn't have to.
Was it difficult, hard?
I think it was decently,
Okay.
finding, the data set that I wanted, and one that I thought, yeah, that's it, But overall, I thought it wasn't terribly hard in the first kind of phase.
Tell me how you try to understand the problem and solve it.
So when I kind of first got that problem statement, I kind of thought, okay, it was very broad. I want cheap vegetables, and I want them fresh. Well, that's very broad. How do you define what's fresh? To you may not be fresh to me. I might want something a little more high end. So kind of narrowing it down to, okay, this is what I mean by it. And I think it was, I think that kind of was my biggest thing with it was,
Great. Tell me, how about your hacking process during the 3 days from the start of the hacking phase until you submitted it? For example, when did you work during the day? Where did you work during that day? How was the GitHub work offline, document everything? How did you integrate the libraries? Pretty much your experience in the hacking on the first phase.
So for the first phase, I like to be alone when I work. So I kind of found a secluded area, kind of walled myself off to think, okay, I need to do this. And for my first phase, I'd worked with GitHub before, and so I had experience with README files and Markdown and figuring out, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I think having that, kind of having that first phase where there wasn't really any code was a good kind of point to say, this is a great place to kind of get my thoughts down, and that way for the rest, for the next 3, I'd be good, and I can just kind of, my idea is down. I know what it is. I don't have to think, oh, what was I going to do again for this part? And so kind of for the first phase, it was really more for me planning, and for me it was just kind of just brainstorming essentially for that part. And so I think that's my main process, I'd say.
All right. Was anything holding you back from submitting?
Not really. It was pretty kind of straightforward for me in terms of, when I thought my product was good enough, I thought, okay, this is good. Occasionally there was a point where I was like, should I add this, or, is it going to really add to the experience or not, and kind of weighing the pros and cons of adding it.
And what about the material on our platform? The tutorials and that, was that helpful for you at the early beginning?
It was with the Google Maps API. I've had experience, with web technologies, and so I had never really worked with Google Maps API before, so having that kind of as an example, I learned mostly by doing and kind of fiddling with stuff. So
and what it was on the tutorials.
The Google Maps API was on the tutorials, and so that helped out pretty well.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was no hassle there.
Yeah. In regards to like the HTML, CSS, and all that stuff, it was pretty straightforward for me because I had dealt with it on a regular basis.
What about the second submission? What was that part? Tell me about it.
So for the second submission, actually was a little bit of a struggle going through that. It was kind of a bit, even though I still had my idea down, it was kind of, okay, I gotta start. I think getting started and kind of getting into the flow is probably the hardest part for me. And so, even though I had that plan down, it was kind of like, okay, I have my ideas in my head, but I have to actually put them, make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think the second part was a little difficult in terms of just kind of getting started and getting that motivation, hey, I need to,
Did you ask for help? Friends, professors?
Stack Overflow.
Stack Overflow. That's a good source. Tell me, how do you use the feedback from the judges? Scores.
Yeah. So with the scores, I kind of looking at each category and kind of trying to understand, okay, this, considering it kind of gave me an idea of, it kind of helped me identify, okay, this might be a problem in the future in terms of like my GUI and all that stuff. And so it kind of allowed me to make decisions based upon that on how I can make it better. So for instance, if there was, if there was a part of it that I knew was bad I thought maybe it might not be good, with that feedback, I was able to kind of alter it and kind of progress my application to refine it a little more.
And what about the criteria? I mean, technology performance, implementation.
Yeah, that definitely kind of helped because having that, looking at, user experience or the technology and the user experience, all that stuff, it was different parts of it that I was able to narrow down. So it wasn't just UI, but it was also, should I use this or should I, how should I?
All right. How many iterations did you make before submitting your first submission or your second?
So, it really was just kind of, for me, just kind of looking at it over, working with Git. I was just kind of had it there since it was on my computer. I was just like, okay, I'll let it sit there before I submit it. And for me, it was, why submit extremely early? I still, I have time to do it before the deadline. So for me, it was, I've got time still to work on it. I'm not going to submit it early because that doesn't, submitting it early doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
so,
but you can do the Git and the push.
Yeah, so I was able to just push my changes and if I needed to, if I was using a different computer. But for the most part, I used one, and so I was able to just kind of think, okay, I don't need to worry too much about it, and just kind of kept it.
On the third submission, was anything different than the previous ones?
Yeah, so for my third one, I'd actually submitted, I was actually getting grip on the data sets. So that was probably the most difficult phase for me because the data sets weren't really formatted in a way that I felt was usable. So I did a lot of parsing through them, trying to make sure that is this going to be an easy is this going to be easy for me to, go in and mess with and do, my analytics and stuff on. So I think the third phase was maybe the hardest to get through because it was time consuming, and I had to make sure that my data was structured correctly, and then of course you run into bugs all the time, so you have to figure out how you.
But that was holding you back from submitting?
It wasn't. Yeah, kind of, because I wanted to make sure that I at least had my data sets in a usable form that I could mess with. So I think that was getting through the data sets was probably the biggest thing for me.
And the last round, how was it?
I think I kind of realized, oh crap, I kind of have to, I need to make sure that my app is usable and that it is going to work. And so while I was going through all the data sets, I had everything there, and it was kind of throwing it up for everyone to see.
And the judges' score was playing a role for you?
Yeah, so at that point, with the score, it kind of helped me think, okay, I'm on the right track. And so it kind of helped motivate me in a way to kind of keep going and make sure that I was kind of on the right track at the end.
So, lastly, how did you experience the overall 3 weeks hacking process?
So I think for me, started out a little bit slow, trying to get into that. Like I said, starting is kind of the hardest part for me. Near the end, I think it was fine. I was getting through it. I was kind of just, when I had some free time, I'd go and code it whenever I could. So I think near the end for me, it was pretty easy. The start of it was getting kind of that started with all the data sets and stuff I hadn't worked with before, and kind of getting used to that. So,
is there anything you would have done differently if you ran the IronHacks?
For me personally, I've had web dev experience before. I know some other people hadn't, and so I think figuring out how to make it so that they understand why you do certain things that you do. I know for JavaScript, it's a very different language. It carries a lot over from other programming languages, but it has its quirks. And so I think kind of getting people to understand, okay, this means this, and kind of defining things and kind of bringing the concepts and applying what people kind of currently know. So applying the concepts of programming with C#, Java, etc. with that, and kind of applying it to JavaScript, and how even though there are different languages and JavaScript can have its quirks, it can be
Benjamin, now that you mentioned that you've participated in other hackathon or other kind of program like this, your thoughts on this virtual 21 days hackathon, this hack, compared to the traditional ones?
It's different, obviously, in the fact that it's 21 days, so most, aren't as long.
And it is virtual.
Yeah, that too. So, besides all that, I think, difference-wise, it was, I know with some others, there's really isn't, it's kind of your idea, there's really no, you need to solve this problem. It's find a problem, solve it, and then they kind of judge you based upon that. So it's different in the fact that we have. But
you mean the 21 days or the
others?
The others.
Yeah. So you don't really have a defined hack, from what I've experienced, and it's kind of, you have a way more broad, one that I almost participated in was, there's a problem in healthcare. What is it? Define that problem and solve it. And so, kind of narrowing it down. Okay, this is your problem statement. It's still a little broad, which allows for the freedom, but it kind of assists. So, you have it defined, and there's more of a real competition, because a problem you might see might not be as, big of a problem as somebody else might see. So I think having, I want cheap vegetables that are fresh. That's a defined one that we can understand. And I think having that was pretty good as well, having a defined problem statement.
And what about the timing? The 21 days and the
Yeah,
3 days.
21 days, definitely more. You know,
What was the learning experience based
so
based on that?
it definitely does allow you to learn because you have 21 days. It's not 3 nights. In 3 nights, you have a defined set of hours that's very constrained. And if it is, 24 hours, however long it is, it's very, very constrained. And if you want to actually learn a lot, and by having it as 21 days, it does allow you to, that's, I don't know how many hours that is, but it's definitely enough for you to learn something. And so I think having that and retaining that for future use is definitely, a plus.
So you find more valuable this experience?
Yeah, having the amount of time of 21 days definitely was, you had the time to learn something you may not have known. And if you had never touched, JavaScript before, 24-hour hack, you're really going to produce some quality content? Maybe, but it's going to be a little harder than somebody, when you have 21 days, you can learn a lot more.
Benjamin, tell me something. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us as an overall of the Gold IronHack experience that you would add, that you would say, no, that's not valuable? The participant, the level of development?
I'm not sure. I'd say from my experience, I had a pretty easygoing time with it, I think with development in general, you have to be careful with some people because if you throw a bunch of stuff at them, they can get overwhelmed and it's a lot. So, if they're learning 50 new things they've never even touched before, like they're not, it's going to be like, wow, what am I doing? It's going to be hard for them. So, I think making sure that, hey, if it is something new, if going in that, hey, this person may not know this, you kind of allow them to have that, you have those resources available so it is easy for them to learn. So, and again, for me, learning is different in terms of I have to mess with something to learn. So some people, there's again the fact that people learn differently, and so I think that needs to be taken into account as well. So I think making sure that the resources are available, but multiple types of resources. So if some people learn through lectures, I don't. I learn through seeing and doing. So having that ability to, work with different learning styles as well is important.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, thank you for taking the time to share all these thoughts with us, with the team. And congratulations on your best solution on the Gold IronHack.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.